Live on WFLA Now. With a specialized degree in climate, Chief Meteorologist and Climate Specialist Jeff Berardelli is pioneering the way we look at climate and extreme weather. Welcome to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by ArmorView Window and Door.
Speaking of extreme weather, it has been a week of extremes here across the Sunshine State, which has lacked some sunshine, at least during parts of this week. And we've seen some tremendous rain events, namely Sarasota picking up over a foot of rain or around a foot of rain, and Miami and that area of South Florida up to Fort Lauderdale picking up 10 to 20 plus inches of rain, and more heavy rain is on the way. These are somewhere around 1 in 250 year events to 1 in 1,000 year events. Now, that might be a little bit confusing. We're going to talk about what that means. It may not mean exactly what you think it means. And we're also going to talk about why it is happening and how climate change is contributing to that. And to speak all about this and more, this is my co-host, Val Simpson. Hey, Val, as you can see right under her name there, it says she is climate curious. You are very curious about climate, aren't you?
I am, because I want to understand how these extreme rain events actually, how is it that the heating climate is actually making these worse and more often too? So I'm looking forward to understanding that in today's episode. You
know, the pictures that we've seen have been just incredible, and I just want to show you. This is South Florida.
Yeah, that's true.
Over the past 24 hours. The amount of damage this is going to cause, I mean, dollars and cents, is going to be off the charts. It's a very urbanized area. The water's got nowhere to go. Plus, it's been extraordinarily rainy for about the past year and a half. I mean, they got a little respite this winter, but, Fort Lauderdale is 60 inches above normal for the past 18 months. So the ground is saturated, plus the fact that it's urbanized. So, again, the water just can't seep in, so it runs off. And so the result of it is that. I want to show you what the radar looked like yesterday as these storms were rolling through. You could see it kind of was coming to an end or tapering off yesterday evening, but watch the whole loop during the day yesterday of that water just round after round.
Look at that, all the
after
red.
Round, just over and over in Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood down to Miami. And, that area is infamous for flooding, and this was a bad one, Val, for them. Yeah. And again, I'd say, and I did some measurements. I looked at how much rain fell in Hollywood over the course of 12 hours, about 14 inches of rain. That makes it a 1 in 250 year type event. But I think, Val, you tell me, do you know what that means? Do you know when we say 1 in 250 year event, what do we mean?
I think that it means that you shouldn't be able to see that only once in a lifetime. That's kind of like what I take from it.
Or once every 2 or 3 lifetimes, unless you happen to be really healthy and can live 250 years, right? So. But what it really means is that, let's say I told you it was a 1 in 1,000 year event. It doesn't mean that it only happens once every 1,000 years. It could happen 2 years in a row. It could happen 3 years in a row. It just means that in any given specific location, like let's say Sarasota, that in any given year, the chance of that happening is only a 1 in 1,000 chance, okay? So it doesn't mean that, that it should only happen once every 1,000 years. Although, given our past climate and our past historical data, what we've seen over the past 100 years, when we do the statistics on it, it should only happen once every 1,000 years. But obviously, we know that we've warmed the climate, and by doing so, we're making these type of events much more likely.
So how does that play a role?
Oh. Yeah, so we can talk all about that. So why don't we talk about that? It just simply loads the dice, right? The atmosphere is warmer. It holds more moisture. And because it holds more moisture, it can dump heavier rain. It's really as simple as that, and we're seeing that happen. But one other thing I want to mention, Val, is these 1 in 100 year events happen every year in the state of Florida, right?
Yeah.
When I say it's a 1 in 100 year event, I don't mean it's a 1 in 100 year event for the state of Florida. I mean, it's a 1 in 100 year event for that specific community that was impacted by that specific storm.
Like in this case in South Sarasota.
That's right.
You're referring to that specific area. Am I correct?
Yeah, so let's show you how much rain has fallen in certain areas. Okay,
let's take a look.
So take a look at this right here. I'm going to take it full so you can see.
Yeah.
So this is over the past 2 days. And you can see that Hallandale Beach in Hollywood, which is North Miami Beach, which is the southern part of Fort Lauderdale, has gotten as much as 20 inches. And they're under a high risk for more heavy rain today because we have another area of heavy rain over West Palm Beach right now. And you'll see that this will fill in. That's all headed south. Yeah. So later this evening, right during the evening commute, that's another area of at least a few to several inches of rain on top of the 20 inches that they've already gotten. And then in terms of Sarasota, these bullseyes are mostly within around a 3-hour stretch. So the 8.5 inches or so that fell in downtown Sarasota in 8 hours, that is a once in 1,000 year event because it happened over such a short period of time. And I'm not just making these up, Val.
Yeah.
These come, and you thought,
No,
let me just tell you, she thought I was a
didn't.
genius. She thought I was a genius, but tell them that I'm not a genius, Val.
No, I was impressed. The producer walked into her office and he was like, I'm calculating. This is the calculation that we found. This is a very rare event. And, you know, he came up with these numbers and I was like, wow, how did you formulate? How did you calculate?
I was doing this. I was just doing all kinds of numbers.
And then he said that he plugged it in, but obviously he knew where to go. He has the tools. He knows exactly where to go to find this information. And he did show me how he did it. Yeah.
So it's not magic, okay?
No.
There's a NOAA website where you say, okay, I know the location. I know exactly how much rain they had. And then the NOAA website tells you exactly how often you should experience that event. And so when I did the math in Sarasota, you need 8.19 inches in 3 hours to be a 1 in 1,000 year event. And wouldn't you know, in downtown Sarasota, one particular sensor that I looked at, it was 8.24.
Yeah.
So barely made the 1 in 1. It doesn't really matter. If it didn't make it, it would have been 1 in 900 years.
Right.
Point is, it's a rare event. Now that, what I would say is even more impressive is the 4 inches in 1 hour. Now that data goes back to 1972. Sarasota doesn't have a very long record. Tampa's back in the late 1800s.
Yeah.
But Sarasota, we've only been keeping records at the airport there since 1972. And that 3 or close to 4 inches in an hour beats the old record of 3 inches in an hour. And I'd say that's even more impressive than the 8.24 inches.
Yeah, I agree. That's that's definitely a lot of rain for sure. I want to take a moment also to remind our viewers that this is an interactive platform. And if you have any questions for Jeff, I'm going to be tracking messages and questions on our Facebook page where this is going live right now.
And even if you want to tell me how much you hate me because you don't particularly like the concept of climate change and you don't believe it, go ahead. Feel free to put those comments on. If you want to tell me how much you love me, I encourage you even more to put those comments on.
I try really hard to filter those out. I don't read those out.
Well, that's why it takes you like a half hour to come up with a question because there's so many negative comments. Yeah.
But anyway, going back to this, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Everybody's got an opinion, Val. So these are directly from the NOAA website. And what you see there in the dark purple, that's a 1 in 200 year event for the greater Sarasota area. But if you did downtown Sarasota, you'd find that over the course of 3 hours, they had a 1 in 1,000 year event. And by the way, the scale stops at 200 years. It doesn't go any higher than that in this graphic. But in the tabular information, it goes a little higher than that. Yeah, and then in terms of, and you can see it better here, and I'll put it full for you. In terms of South Florida, there were 2 bullseyes, one along the coast, one where the alligators live. And I haven't heard any complaints from alligators about the rain. They happen to like it. Yeah. But along the coast, you can see that deep purple. That's a 1 in 250 year event. I did the math on that as well. And you might question, well, there was more rain in South Florida than there was in Sarasota. Why is it a 1 in 250 year event in a place where it rained more, but a one of that? That's because they get these events more often in South Florida because it's more of a tropical climate. Right. And so they get these heavier rain events more often than we would, let's say, in Central Florida. That's the reason.
Gotcha. So do the winds play a role in this case? Were the winds pushing the storms also?
This is a good question. Yeah. So generally speaking, what happens along the East Coast is you have some type of speed convergence. Okay. Now, I didn't look at it yesterday, but I can only guess, and almost every time, if you looked at the satellite and you could see all the explosions of storms, there was one over the Everglades, but then there was another kind of ignition point right along the immediate coast. It kept happening over and over again. Yeah. And that's because there are boundaries that sit on the coast. They may be moisture boundaries, they may be temperature boundaries, or more often they're essentially coastal convergence. The winds hit the coast, and friction slows those winds down, and so all the winds pile up on the coast. Yeah, and it's called forced descent. It forces the air to rise. So yes, along the coast we tend to have another essentially spike in heavy rainfall. So let me show you this graphic. This is just incredible to me. Since 2023 and including 2023, so essentially the last 18 months, Fort Lauderdale has had 59 inches of rain above normal. If you remember last April, sometime in the middle of April, I think it was maybe April 12th or something, they had 25 inches in a day. Yeah, I remember that. Yesterday, Fort Lauderdale had closer to 10 inches in a day. So that last April event was like 2 to 3 times worse in terms of downtown Fort Lauderdale, at least. Yeah. This time, Hollywood got hit harder than Fort Lauderdale, which is really just a few miles down the road. But anyway, 59 inches above normal, Val. Yeah. That is a whole year's worth. That's the normal rainfall.
That they would
61 inches is the normal rain the whole year
that they would
in
get.
Fort Lauderdale.
That's
Their
unbelievable.
surplus is a whole
And
year's
you just
worth
said
of
that
rain.
it's going to continue raining later today. What does this mean for these folks?
Well, the ground is completely saturated now.
Yeah.
There's plenty of standing water already. It's going to be adding insult to injury. The National Weather Service, and essentially it's not the National Weather Service local office, but it's the National Weather Service, the parent, NOAA, has put them in a high risk for flooding. Now, that doesn't sound very impressive, but high risks only happen a handful of times a year, and they very rarely happen in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
So it's an imminent danger type of day in South Florida.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of insurance claims because I saw a lot of vehicles that were stuck there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in those floods.
Yeah, we've already had something like more than $12 billion disasters this year alone in the United States.
Yeah.
Now, we used to average just a few $1 billion disasters a year back in the 1980s, and now we average over 20 a year. So you can see that has increased. That's not because we don't adjust for inflation. We do actually adjust those numbers for inflation. It's because climate change is making storms stronger. We're seeing more extreme weather, but even more so, it's because people are building stuff in harm's way more often. There's more people, more infrastructure, and it costs more to build back.
Right.
Supplies cost more, workers cost more. And so that's also driving this increase in billion-dollar disasters.
Jeff, do you think that this is this going to be the new norm? Will this be something that Hollywood, Broward County is going to be seeing every year?
It's going to be different. It's going to be at a different place every year. And that's another thing, too. You remember last year we had that big heat dome over Canada, right?
Yeah.
And Canada had all these crazy fires, and it hasn't been as bad this year. You remember a few years ago, California was under the gun with these crazy heat waves and this bad drought. It moves around. Every year, the prevailing climate pattern will take these heat domes and move them into a different place depending upon the prevailing pattern. So if I were to say to you, yeah, we're going to see this every year in Broward, and then next year we don't see it in Broward, everyone would say, well, I told you, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's not going to happen in Broward next time. Maybe next time it'll be West Palm.
Yeah.
Or maybe next time it'll be Tampa. Or maybe next time it'll be Melbourne or Jacksonville.
Yeah.
The point is that it's going to happen more often in general, but it won't always happen in the same place.
Gotcha.
Okay, let me tell you why.
Yes.
You want to talk more about that?
I did have a question in regards to that because someone here wrote, Cindy Shireman, this is a question. She said, how is Orlando or Daytona? I guess.
Because we all live in Florida, we all run the risk of having more substantial extreme weather events and rain events. Orlando is no exception to that. It is more common near the coast. And I talked about why, but we'll talk about it again. Near the coast, you have a natural boundary that forms, right, between the Gulf or on the Atlantic side, the Atlantic Ocean, and land. There's a natural boundary there. Often it's formed by temperature differences, humidity differences, or more importantly, often it is wind differences because winds over the water will blow 2 to 3 times as fast as winds over land. As soon as those winds slow down, they pile up and force the air up. So you're more likely to see these heavy rain events close to the coast. And by the way, you have a moisture source right there to fuel these big events. And when I saw, when I saw what was happening in Sarasota before it happened, I immediately was able to identify this is going to be a bad flood for Sarasota. And if you were watching us on TV during the 5 o'clock show or the 6 o'clock show, way before the flooding really started, we were really raising the alarm about this event. It had all the classic signs of what was going to be a localized one in a whatever year.
You did send an email out to the newsroom.
I did. Yeah, and I don't often do that because I'm not a very dramatic person. Might seem I'm dramatic. Am I dramatic?
You're not.
I'm not a dramatic person. So when I do that, it's very rare that I would do something like that. So let's talk about the science behind it.
Okay.
Okay, and then we can go back to questions again. So this is very simple. If you warm the atmosphere, and we have warmed Earth's atmosphere on average by 3 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1800s.
Yeah.
If you warm the atmosphere, you get 4% more moisture per degree Fahrenheit. It's very simple. Okay, so if you have 3 degrees warming, that means you have the capacity for 12% more atmospheric moisture. That's it. It's very, very simple. It's all just math. There's no magical spells and no creativity that's involved here. So we have a lot more moisture than we used to have, and I'm going to show you that in a second. That means that extreme rain events become more frequent, and by the way, they become more intense because there's more moisture in the atmosphere for them. Now, one other thing that it does, Val, and I'm gonna minimize this. I want to bring us both in here.
Yeah.
It's not just the extra moisture in the atmosphere that gets rained out like a sponge. Hold on. Sponge.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay. It's also that the extra energy due to the warmth and the extra moisture actually makes these storms stronger, increases the vertical motion in the atmosphere, and that increases our rain rate. So it's not that there's just more moisture falling out, there's heavier rain rates falling out. Yeah. So it's not just a 12% increase in rain. For instance, in some really extreme events like Hurricane Harvey, there were many studies on this. Some studies found that Hurricane Harvey's rain was about 15% worse because of climate change. Other studies found that it was up to 38% worse. And because of that many more homes flooded. And because that many more homes flooded, it added $13 billion in damage. So climate change was responsible for about $13 billion extra dollars in damage because of the extra homes flooded, because of the extra 30 to 40% rainfall on top of what Hurricane Harvey produced. And by the way, if you remember, Hurricane Harvey produced up to 60 inches of rain. Now, that's a really extreme event.
Right.
I would say that the increase in rainfall in general in these extreme events is probably closer to around 20%, give or take.
Yeah.
But again, Harvey was a rarity.
Yeah. No, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's very intense.
Yes.
Gotcha.
So that's the science behind it. Yeah. So it's not like, I think people when they think about climate change, they think that scientists are just spewing off nonsense.
Yeah.
This is a mathematical equation. It's called the Clausius-Clapeyron equation. Do I get a buzzer for that?
I'm going to buzz you.
Okay. I brought the Clausius-Clapper out of my pocket there just because I wanted
to get buzzed.
I wanted to get buzzed. I was hoping that you'd buzz me.
You're explaining the 3 degrees higher in temperature causing that. That's what that's called. Okay.
That's the Clausius-Clapeyron.
We can't find an easier name, an easier pronunciation for that.
You know what? I think that the person Clausius
he would be very
upset with you right now. Right. He'd probably be upset because you're trying to take his namesake away from him.
You're right. Okay. Yeah. We'll leave it.
So do you want to move on and just and then we'll take questions because this is I think my last graphic here. Just two
what
graphics.
Are you going to share?
Okay. So just to prove to you that this is happening, because we can tell you theoretically this is what the math says should happen, but let's show you what actually is happening. So during the month of May, that is the dew point ranking in the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. The blue indicating the highest dew point ranking since 1940. Okay, and you can see in and around the state of Florida and out in the Gulf of Mexico, because by the way, the Gulf of Mexico has been record warm. Yeah. The dew point ranking all the way to Texas and Louisiana is the highest ever. Now, if you go into Central Florida, it's a little less actually. But you can clearly see that the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and areas surrounding it, they had their highest dew point ranking. The dew point is a measure of atmospheric moisture at the surface. And the higher the dew point, the higher our heat index numbers. And so anybody who was around in Florida during the month of May knows that it was a stifling month, partially due to the heat being in the mid-90s, partially due to the dew point being so hot. All right, but with that said, let me show you some other measure of the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. This is called the precipitable water, which basically is a look at the total column moisture in the atmosphere. So not just the surface, dew point's just a measure of surface, but the total column, if you add it all up from the ground all the way up to the clouds or in the clouds, what you come up with is a total column water. And you can see that since around 1970, that has been going up. We've seen a gradual upward trend. You can see a lot more red on the right side of the graph and a lot more blue on the left side of the graph, indicating an upward trend in the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. The more moisture you have, the more extreme these rain events get.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Does this have anything to do with the La Niña or El Niño climate pattern? Have we seen,
Not what's going on today. No. What's been going on this week, and I'll tell you why. Because as of today, Val, I didn't know. I don't know if you planned this.
What?
But as of today, NOAA has declared that El Nino is dead.
It's what?
It's dead. It died today.
You're kidding.
Yep. Rip El Nino.
So there's no more El Nino.
No, El Nino's done for today. Okay. It could come back in a couple of years from now. It'll be resurrected from the dead.
Oh, okay.
In about 2 or 3 years.
So we're officially
in neutral conditions in the Pacific. Neutral
Gotcha.
conditions.
Okay.
So you can't attribute this to El Nino.
No.
And you really can't attribute it to La Nina either because we're not quite in a La Nina. We will be in a La Nina in about 1.5 to 2 months. So let's see.
Okay.
It's June. Sometime in July, probably towards the end, they will declare officially that La Nina has begun. And then if you want to start tossing blame towards La Nina, you can do so. But right now, we're in neutral conditions in the Pacific Ocean. Okay?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. It's not related to that. That is devastating right there. Those images.
That was yesterday.
How sad.
That was yesterday. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the radar from right now and just show you. And by the way, there's not much rain around our area. We do have some showers and some storms here, but It's mostly in South Florida that is just awaiting the arrival of this band of heavy rain. Hopefully it doesn't linger. So, to bring up, that's what it looked like yesterday. This morning, there was still so much standing water and so many rescues that were going on overnight last night. But just to show you what's on the way, you can see the heavy storms right over Lake Okeechobee and down to Palm Beach County. Now entering Broward, so it's literally knocking on the door of Fort Lauderdale.
Any hope that these might die down or slow down a bit? Because they look quite
No,
intense.
I mean, no, they're going to get some rain. The hope is they only end up at 1 or 2 inches and not 5 or 6 inches.
Yeah.
And hopefully, obviously, they don't get more than that. But clearly, things are about to get worse before they get better there. Now, look, a couple things. Again, it's not abnormal for us to get these 20-inch rain events. That happens. When I worked in West Palm Beach about 10 years ago, one of my first, months on air, we had something like 23 inches of rain in 6 hours in Boynton Beach and Delray Beach. Had to close down I-95.
Oh, wow.
We see these type of events somewhere in the state of Florida at least once a year. Yeah. And because I've been working here a long time, I can immediately identify when they're beginning. You can just see the signatures on the radar, which kind of really, it helps.
It just seems to me that we're seeing them much more often, and they're happening in multiple places, and they're happening more frequently. I don't know if...
I mean, it does seem that way,
Yeah.
and certainly extreme weather is increasing. We have seen an increase in extreme rain events. But I think part of it is that, there's a lot more places we consume media. There's a lot more media out there to broadcast this stuff out there. So it's not just that there's more of these events. It's also we're getting better at communicating them. 10 years ago, you would have rarely ever heard a scientist say this is a 1 in a 1,000-year event. But we now have the statistics and the tools to help us communicate this better. And so I think that's another thing, too. We didn't talk about these events in 1 in 100 or 1 in a 1,000-year terms 10, 20 years ago. That's a very catchy term, right? People remember that. Oh, my God, it's a 1 in a 1,000-year term. Wait a second, 1 in a 1,000-year event? We had a 1 in a 1,000-year event last year. They did in Fort Lauderdale with that crazy flood in April. Well, they remember that. And so to them, it seems like it's happening more. It is happening more. We are seeing more of these. But I think part of it is just the psychology and the media,
how it's
hearing
being
it
communicated.
more.
I do have a question. This
Sure.
is from David Faisal. He says, seems climate is worse from Tampa Bay to the Keys. Is climate worse in the South?
I guess he probably means the Southeast, like north of us,
yes.
like in New Orleans and stuff.
No, he meant Florida. He's specifically referring to Florida.
Oh, well,
In comparison to the north of Florida.
well, in for this particular storm, it just so happens that the heaviest moisture has been over South Florida.
Yeah.
But in general, they are more of we're more of a subtropical climate here in Tampa. Miami is deeply tropical. So, as you get into a more tropical climate, in general, you have more moisture available for bigger storms and for heavier rain. So that's why the return interval on for like a 1 in a 1,000-year event in Sarasota is only like a little over 8 inches of rain. We're in 3 hours. Whereas a 1 in a 1,000-year event in South Florida is probably closer to a foot or more because they have more moisture available and they get stronger, storms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nancy Lyons says, hey, Jeff, will North Pinellas County get any more rain?
That's a good question. So why don't I do this? Why don't I take this and move it and show you what's going on across our area? And I'll bring this up full so you can see. So I know that I'm assuming that she's asking that because she wants more rain because we didn't obviously get the boatload of rain. Although although Tarpon Springs and actually the first band of rain, Tarpon ended up at like 5 or 6 inches. Newport Richey got that too, and there was flooding on US 19. So they got a pretty good dose of rain. But no, as of right now, no. Over the next few days, straight through next week, we're getting into a normal rainy season pattern. We do expect scattered storms, and some of those will make their way back to the coast, although the majority is probably going to be east of I-75. But yeah, I do think northern Pinellas at some point in the next few days will pick up another downpour. But it's going to just be normal, kind of typical rain. Nothing, all that, obviously the deepest moisture has been shunted south over South Florida.
Well, you're on that topic. Annette Gonzalez says, she's asking, is it really bad in Hillsborough County? I'm assuming she doesn't live in the area.
Yeah, no, there's nothing much in Hillsborough County right now. I can zoom in a little bit. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Yeah, I guess folks are just concerned or worried about
we've had
what's
the
happening.
showers over Sarasota and Manatee County because they're closer to that deep tropical moisture over South Florida. but there hasn't been much north of it. And this is actually expected today.
And we're also expecting drier air to push through, right, into our area.
Yeah.
Going into the weekend starting next. Yeah.
We're going to see a little bit of that this weekend and early next week. And that'll just get us back to normal in terms of rain chances.
Okay.
Which is like that 50% chance of daily storms. So things are kind of getting back to normal around here. One thing I should mention is this system has a small chance of becoming a tropical storm over the Gulf Stream. It's moving out into the Atlantic right now. It's not going to matter if it becomes a named storm, but we haven't yet seen a named storm.
Yeah.
Also on Monday-ish, there's a chance that the system in the Bay of Campeche has a better chance of becoming a named system. Yeah. That, as last check, was a 40% chance of development. I don't know if they've increased that since the last couple hours.
Yeah.
But that one actually I think has a pretty decent chance. Again, not going to affect us. So for now, I would say get your rest and relaxation, Val, because it is going to be a very active hurricane season for you, for me, for everyone in the Weather Center. Hopefully it just doesn't affect us here in the Tampa Bay.
You did say, though, the day before that the National Hurricane Center was looking into that area over on the west coast of the Gulf of Mexico, that tropical moisture was going to be moving towards that area, and there was a possibility that we could see something there. And then the next day, bam, there it was. Yellow area with a 30% chance of development in the
turns
next
out,
days.
Val,
you have that crystal ball.
As a weather forecaster, my job is to forecast what could possibly happen in the future.
I know. I just love seeing it in real time. I'm very fortunate.
You patting me
I know.
on the back.
But it's great that we talk about it here in the weather office, and then all of a sudden, it just comes the next day. That's great. Yeah. So good stuff.
Well, I appreciate it, Val. And listen, everybody, I am going to have to go, and so is Val, because we have other work to do. But I just want to say, if you want to go to our website and check out the article, check it out. If it's not on the homepage, it'll be under the weather tab, and then click Climate Classroom, and you should be able to see it there. Also, I just want to let you know that you can listen to this broadcast not just on Facebook where you're watching it now, or on WFLA.com where you're watching it now. We're going to, again, package up this broadcast. I think that's the way we do it. Yep. And then we throw it over to YouTube like this, and it arrives sometime later. So sometime later today, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube, and also you can listen to it on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. That's awesome as well.
And if I didn't get to any of the questions, where can we invite viewers to send in questions?
Weather at WFLA.com.
Okay.
If you have a question, and by the way, if you ever watch me on TV, you know I do something called the Berardelli bonus every day, and I love when I get viewer questions. I try to use the ones that I think I can answer. And please send me questions, weather at WFLA.com. And I just want to say thank you, Val. You're always such a great co-host. I'm so glad that you're here in the Weather Center with me so we can do this show together. All right, everybody.
Until next time.
I want to thank you, everybody, for joining in, and I will see you again next time on the Climate Classroom.
Watch or listen to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by Armor View Window and Door on WFLA social media platforms, and find Jeff's climate reports on WFLA.com.